We were just discussing all the issues before we came in here, and you could hardly get a word in edgewise. There's so much going on and so many complexities in the world. So we'll start with a couple of issues that have just happened recently. I'll introduce you to the panel first. On your left here, we have the Abroad-Youssef Amrani, who is head of mission for the Royal Cabinet of Morocco. Next to him, we have General Gratien Maire, who is the Vice Chief of Defense of France. The Honorable Didier Reynders, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium, and U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions. So thank you very much for being here. We want to remind you that you can, sure that will come up again in our discussions, because there are so many countries working on the problem of countering terror abroad, from North Africa to the Middle East to Europe. We've got a real global challenge now of terrorism that keeps spreading. We're conducting airstrikes, we're conducting drone strikes, we're sending in special forces to various places. It sometimes seems as if this chase will never end. And we're throwing a whole lot of money at this problem. So I'm wondering to get your thoughts, your broad views on what's happening now strategically, and we'll dive into more specific detail after your initial comments. But I know it's a very complex situation, but are we succeeding in what we're doing right now? And let's start with you on the left, Mr. Amrani.
Well, thank you very much for choosing this very important topic today. I think we have to be very frank tackling this issue. Today we are all targeted. Countries in the southern Mediterranean, the European countries, and beyond, the transatlantic in America and elsewhere. I completely share the views expressed by Didier, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belgium, about the necessity of what I call the security approach. Exchange of intelligence, military intervention in conflict. It is important important tool to face the terrorist activities and to combat Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, and others. But it's not sufficient. We need a comprehensive approach. Of course, I'm speaking from a southern perspective, from Morocco, who's chairing the Committee on Foreign Fighters with our partners from Europe. We are cooperating very closely with Belgium as far as dismantling cells. And we have a great experience in this issue, and we'll continue. But we feel that today we need to have a comprehensive approach towards terror. How? I think we need 4 fundamentals and parameters. First, the political development in our region, because the Arab Spring has opened new prospects. But in fact, what happens today in our region is more insecurity, more fragmentation, and because of lack of political development. When I say political development is implementation of democracy, good governance, respect of universal values, because at the end of the day, we share the same values. The second fundamental and parameter is the economic. Because at the end of the day, what imports is how much job do you create to face the expectation of the young generation. It's essential to promote growth, to create jobs, and this, we know the tools. Openness, free trade agreements, but also we have to do our own homework internally. When I say internally, it means at the level of the countries of the region. We should build up coherent regional integration schemes. The Maire, for example, and Didier know, Maghreb is for Morocco is a priority. We could, building up the Maghreb, a regional coherent gathering, face the terrorist threat. Try to solve the Libyan conflict, where we were very much engaged as Moroccans in the Sahara talk. I will talk about Libya later on. To create jobs, to connect networks, transport, energy. This is the way. The third one is cooperation at the field of intelligence, dismantling cells. This cooperation should be frank, should be on a daily basis. And the fourth parameter is the deconstruction of the narrative, of the extremist narrative. And we can help in this. Because we are all targeted. The countries of the Maghreb and the Sahel and don't. And last year we were talking here and we were warning our colleagues, watch what is happening in Mali. Thanks to the French intervention, at that time we were in the Security Council and we helped for the resolution, we were able to face and to chase the extremists, but we not solve the problem. And last year we warned here that watch Boko Haram, watch Niger. Today we have even attacks of extremist movement in Côte d'Ivoire, in Burkina Faso. And the Sahel must be a priority for us. So I said deconstruction, how? Through a new narrative. Because today these bad guys, they control internet. They have access to financial means. They tackle the young generation and other generations too. So we need to have the tools. In Morocco, we have been embarked in this approach and we'd like to share it with you. We are not even talking with our partners in Europe and Africa to train imams, men and women. But train imams is only on the fundamentals of this tolerant Islam, this open Islam. Because today Islam is being hijacked by a minority who promote culture of hate and exclusion. And that's why we need, like in Morocco, the Rabitat Ulamat, to have a new discourse, that is consistent with our shared values of human rights and democracy. And this fourth priority, I think, today is important. And we are doing this also with France. And we are training French imams. Of course, there is this kind of specificity, but today religion is essential. And then from that, one important aspect is the reform of education in our countries. That takes into consideration our specificities, yes, but also gender equality, human rights, openness to the other religions, to other cultures. And this is thanks to the leadership of King of Morocco today. We are working on this four-track dimension strategy to combat terrorism. The political development, deepening democracy, economic job creation, cooperation and security and intelligence, and for the deconstruction of the jihadist narrative, but proposing an alternative narrative which is consistent and in conformity with our shared values.
Thank you, General.
Yeah, first of all,
I want to add only one
very
word
quickly,
because
please.
Very quickly, I was very brief. I think we need also, Minister, to reconstruct the international order.
Yeah.
And as a partner to Europe, I want to take this opportunity to request you to have a more ambitious policy towards the Mediterranean and towards the South. As far as one of the key actors in the European Union, today we feel, from the Southern perspective, there's a lack of ambitions of Europe. And I hope that the new communication of Mrs. Mogherini on June on the policy of security and defense will take this into consideration. Because we had ambition to work with you, and it is on your interest, because we are all targeted, to build up a policy that buys stability in our region. Also, I see some colleagues from NATO. NATO also has a new strategic concept. And I think also you should seek to find the necessary coherence in the international arrangement for peace and stability in the region. And I think time has come, we could have avoided this refugee crisis if 3 years ago we were able, at the level of the Security Council, to find an outcome to the Syrian crisis. We were divided. At the time, Morocco was in the Security Council. I presented the resolution on the Security Council on Syria. It was vetoed. But 3 years ago, there was no ISIS in Syria. There was only Jabhat al-Nusra, who played allegiance to Al-Qaeda, but ISIS was not. And we were divided, and we were not able to act. And this is, I think, we should now look and seek for new arrangement at the level of the Security Council to move forward. It is, of course, a question of shared responsibility. We don't have to blame the others. We need to do our own homework, but we need to have you on board as our partners.
Okay, Senator, fighting a war.
I want just to add one word, I think, in the case of Libya, for example. Let me say I completely share the transitions, the peace building will be long, will be complicated, will be difficult. In the case for Libya, for example, we had last year the talks between all Libyan factions in Morocco, with the support of our partners at the UN, at Europe. At the beginning, They could not talk to each other, different factions. How could you, after the success of the military intervention in Libya, how could you build up something coherent, something consistent with two governments, two parliaments, no civil society, no political parties? And we were able, after hours and days and months of negotiation, to compromise on the formation of a government of national unity to move forward. But when we came to implement the decisions, it was another story. Still, because they are different actors, we need to not only to compromise on a political solution, and the respect of, I think, something essential today, and I think Didier would agree with me, the respect of the independence, the national unity of countries, and the political transition and compromise to move towards a political solution. This is the way how we should move, I think, towards this. But this is, I think, it will take time. The military is essential. Intelligence is essential. Growth, you know, it is, we need to work together. And they are the two faces of the same coin. They have to go together. The military, the intelligence, security, and the block of political. Two faces of the...
But we need to learn some lessons from the past. We have some success now on the ground with military action, it's true. But just after such a success, we need to organize the reconstruction of the cities and of the countries. We have seen that in Iraq and in Libya in the past. It was maybe a success with some military actions, but without any capacity to rebuild immediately the country and to provide some services to the population. So it's quite important now in Syria and Iraq to start immediately the reconstruction of the cities and the different places, and then to have real political discussions. On the other side, as a diplomat of Minister of Foreign Affairs, I want to say that we need also to try to send sometimes the same message to some partners. I mean, between the US and Europe. It's quite important to try to see what kind of dialogue with Russia. Because we don't have only the situation in Syria. We are facing Ukraine for the moment. And so how it's possible to be firm on some positions with Russia, but to have a sort of dialogue, to be open to try to find a way to have a political solution in Ukraine, in Syria, in other places. And more than that, I said, due to the fact that we have had a success in the nuclear talks with Iran, how it's possible to try to, if I may, put together Saudi Arabia and Iran in different talks, because we are knowing that there is a real fight in the region between some powers. And so I'm sure that in the relation between the US and Europe, it's quite important to find a way to send a common message about those issues, at least, to Russia on one side, but also to the two partners in the region, Saudi Arabia and Iran. Because without talks among those partners, it will be impossible to solve the situation. So we need to have a military action, but we need to try to organize the transition and to learn, I repeat, the lesson from the past. Because, if I may to be short, the military action in Libya was a success. And then, the day after. And now we are knowing that we need to do something the day after. And it's the case for the moment in Syria and Iraq, we try to do the job. We try to come immediately with some capacity to rebuild the cities, to provide services, security, education, all the different services to the population. But after all, we need a political solution, and to have a political solution, we need to send a very clear message to some partners, if I may, Russia, and the two major partners in the region, Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Do you think Russia should be involved in the military coalition against ISIS?
They were.
Should they be working with the coalition?
Because, but I mean, with the airstrikes from Russia, it was impossible to organize other airstrikes from the coalition sometimes. So it was not a real collaboration, but in the practice it was a fact. And I don't know, maybe one day we will have a new resolution from the Security Council to work together against Daesh. But to do that, again, we need to have a political solution. Without a real political agreement about Syria, it will be impossible to have everybody around the table and to work together against Daesh.
It would seem from common sense that we should be able to reach an accord with Russia, although it's certainly been problematic recently.
Running sort of short on time here, so let's go to questions. There's one right here in the back. And if you would state your name, please, and your
Yes.
affiliation.
Asia bin Salih Halawi, Ambassador at Large of His Majesty the King of Morocco. As we see ISIS losing ground in the Levant, we see it reemerge everywhere else, and particularly in Libya, because its central objective, as the General said, is to take roots and have a territory. So my question, having taken note of what you have said about the longer-term approach, about the necessity of learning lessons, about what my compatriot said about the efforts deployed in Morocco for the political solution, what can be done efficiently to prevent ISIS from really taking root there, knowing that it has already assaulted Tunisia and its nation democracy being threatened by the twin threats, as you know, Kasserine, Algerian frontier, and ISIS in the east, and beyond, to take real and stronger links with the local terrorist groups in the Sahel and in Africa, which, of course, are threatening the whole region and destabilizing, potentially, North Africa, which is the last stable place, you know, Morocco and Algeria.
If we could make the answers really brief, please. We've got a lot to get to.
I'm not going to answer because I share
Okay.
completely views. But
We
I
would
would
like
say,
to-
just to
I would
say
say
that
we
we-
need to join our effort to fight terror.
But
Okay.
we need to work with the new government in Libya.
Yeah.
There's the only one way. Maybe with a recognition by the United Nations, but also without a real recognition, we need not to work with the new government in Libya. And it's the only one way. If it's possible to work with the new government, we will start the process to rebuild a real country, and so to try to find on the ground again against the terrorist groups. But the only one way now is to try to work with the new government of Libya. It's the only one way.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Christoph von Marschall from Germany. Some of the answers seem to me a little bit too easy, and we are oddly dancing around the real problems. I mean, when I hear we need now to exchange more information about terrorism, I have heard that after 9/11, I have heard that after London, I have heard that after Madrid. Come on, then we should talk why it is not happening if there is still a bigger need. So what are the obstacles? The same if you say, well, rebuilding immediately after, is there really a lack of willingness of the West to provide money, or is it the conditions on the ground? And shouldn't we say the West is not the babysitter who has to bring all the people on the ground together? That's the responsibility of the countries first. And we might give reconstruction money if the conditions on the ground are right. But this blame game, the West or does not provide money or is getting out of a nation building, there's a reason why these decisions have been made.
Can one person take this and make it very brief and right to the point?
I think we should do our own homework at the north and at the south. We have to extend intelligence, and thanks to the cooperation, we have been able to dismantle a lot of cells in Europe thanks to the information gathered and given. Now, if we need to do our homework internally at the level of the Maghreb and so on, we need to have more, as I was saying, more ambitious, new neighborhood policy. You know, we know that we don't have the same political perspectives as the Eastern Partnership to join the European Union. But I think we can have some new instruments and new arrangements to work together.
Okay,
but there is a commitment to work because...
General, did you want to say
You
something?
just may briefly perhaps give some ways to answer your questions. We're not facing a static threat. The threat is evolving as well. So whatever efforts we try to do, and we do, when you say there is nothing that has been done, or you may think that, there are many, many things that have been done, but in face of us, we have a threat, we have people that always change and adapt and adjust to what we do. So it's always the story, the old story of trying to protect and to attack. So we have to also to understand that in face of us, we have people who are evolving. So we have to permanently adjust and do more. That's why when we say we need to do more, we've done a lot, but we need to continue, because in face of us, we have a threat which is evolving.
There's a gentleman right there with the red book, right to your left.
A long process.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to exchange with the ambassador of NATO a few months ago, with the NATO ambassadors. I think you give me an opportunity to request you that NATO should look more south. And now we have this Med dialogue, it's only 1 year meeting. We need, I think, from Moroccan perspective, more interoperability, more political dialogue. And I hope that we know you're working under this new strategic dialogue. We need you to see the Mediterranean and beyond South Sahel and Atlantic coast of Africa, where today 30% of the cocaine and traffic is coming, to give it a priority. As a NATO ambassador, I think this is something you should look at it. I know it's difficult and there's some resistance, but this is the request of your Mediterranean partners.
Just, if I may, just
sure.
one short word. Rather than deter, I would prefer prevent.
We have a question right here.
My name is Simon Fraser. I'm a former British diplomat. I have a question for the General, if I may. As a military leader, how do you evaluate the relative priority of terrorism as a threat, as a security threat, as compared with some of the more conventional threats we face or may face, whether it is Russia or even actually for the Senator potentially China at some point, and the other threats such as cyber security, which are growing dangers to us? I mean, where in the hierarchy of threat does terrorism really sit?
Well, I would say that it's not addressing in the same. It's very difficult to compare. For a conventional threat, we have in a conventional world, and there are rules, if I may say so, that we understand. With the terrorist threat, we are totally different environment. No more rules. Violence is being used. Ideology, much more than the conventional Westphalian type of conflict. So it's totally different, first. Second, I think it's a much more important threat to our own societies collectively. It's really the heart of our values that are threatened. And that's why I would put this on the far top of the thing that we have to address. Because this is our own values which are really threatened by this ideology. And again, we're discussing about how to deal with this. It's very complicated. I would argue that the situation today in Syria and Iraq, tomorrow perhaps in Libya, is a very, very complex one. We all know that. It's very difficult to know where to adjust and to push and which button to push.
It's a long process.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to exchange with the ambassador of NATO a few months ago, with the NATO ambassadors. I think you give me an opportunity to request you that NATO should look more south. I know we have this Med dialogue, it's only 1 year meeting. We need, I think, from Moroccan perspective, more interoperability, more political dialogue. And I hope that we know you're working under this new strategic dialogue. We need you to see the Mediterranean and beyond South Sahel and Atlantic coast of Africa, where today 30% of the cocaine and traffic is coming, to give it a priority. As a NATO ambassador, I think this is something you should look at it. I know it's difficult and there's some resistance, but this is the request of your Mediterranean partners.
Just, if I may, just
sure.
one short word. Rather than deter, I would prefer prevent.
We have a question right here.
My name is Simon Fraser. I'm a former British diplomat. I have a question for the General, if I may. As a military leader, how do you evaluate the relative priority of terrorism as a threat, as a security threat, as compared with some of the more conventional threats we face or may face, whether it is Russia or even actually for the Senator potentially China at some point, and the other threats such as cyber security, which are growing dangers to us? I mean, where in the hierarchy of threat does terrorism really sit?
Well, I would say that it's not addressing in the same. It's very difficult to compare. For a conventional threat, we have in a conventional world, and there are rules, if I may say so, that we understand. With the terrorist threat, we are totally different environment. No more rules. Violence is being used. Ideology, much more than the conventional Westphalian type of conflict. So It's totally different, first. Second, I think it's a much more important threat to our own societies collectively. It's really the heart of our values that are threatened. And that's why I would put this on the far top of the thing that we have to address. Because this is our own values which are really threatened by this ideology. And again, we're discussing about how to deal with this. It's very complicated. I would argue that the situation today in Syria and Iraq, tomorrow perhaps in Libya, is a very, very complex one. We all know that. It's very difficult to know where to adjust and to push, on which button to push, trying to solve the issue. But really, the terrorism is the one who is really threatening our societies, our values. So we have really to address this one on the far front of our preoccupation.
I could not have asked for a better segue. We've got a forum. We're going to continue the security talk in a little bit, and the topic is security or values. But there's something coming up next, so we want you all to stay around for that. Derek?
Well, thank you for a terrific opening discussion. What we heard, it was that to take on the fight against terrorism, it's going to need to be multifaceted. It's not just military force. We need a comprehensive approach, and it's going to take time. But what we've discussed so far is from the outside looking in. And of course, it is always important for us to keep in mind what is going on the ground. And a key part of the West strategy in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere is to build partner capacity, to work with those in the country so they could provide for their own security and deal with the tremendous challenges that they're facing in their country. So our next conversation, the second part of this opening section, will provide us a perspective from on the ground. And with that, I will turn it over to Kim Dozier of the Daily Beast and CNN.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Derek. And what we're going to do right now is just inject a little bit of on-the-ground reality into the discussion, because we've been hearing a lot about policy, prescriptions from people who live far away, haven't spent as much time as these two women have in the region. Let's see, I'm trying not to do the deep breathing thing on the microphone to you all. So I want to introduce Dr. Nada Mohammed Ibrahim Al-Jabouri. She is a former member of the Iraqi Council of Representatives and the head of Iraqi Women and Future organization. She's also a member of the Reconciliation Committee in Baghdad. And also, you have seen her before on the stage, Nancy Lindbergh, the president of the United States Institute of Peace. So let's start with that first question. Give us a snapshot. Nada, what is it like on the streets of Baghdad today?
Thank you. Actually, now I think most of you, they know there is a lot of chaos in Baghdad, and there is a lot of demonstration in the streets everywhere around the Green Zone, which is the residential place for the Iraqi government and the parliament. And those demonstrations have been run by al-Sadrists, asking for real reconciliation. But this is, you can see on TV, and if you go to Baghdad, maybe you cannot walk from one area to one area. And every now and then there is maybe one explosion. And also there is kidnapping and disappearing of some of the figures, of the social figures. So more or less it is unstable and fragile political process as a whole.
So when you leave your house, do you have a bodyguard? Do you think about your security? Do you look to the end of the block to see if you see someone suspicious? How do you travel around?
No, for me, I travel around with one body only. Since the beginning in my work, as a politician. I used to be like this because I cannot think about it actually. When I think about it, that means I'm not going to leave my house in the morning, so I never think about it. Maybe sometimes I pray and leave the house because it's very difficult to think about it. That means you are not going to do anything. So it's better not to think because you don't know who is the enemy and you don't know who is the friend.
So
This is the problem.
Rather than let fear freeze you in place, you just know the danger's out there and do it anyway.
Yes, you know, but there was sometimes we had some stability for a while in Baghdad. But it doesn't mean stability in Baghdad that I'm going to stop thinking about Anbar and Salahuddin and Mosul, who I'm receiving a lot of calls and requests, and I meet the displaced people maybe every other day, everywhere. So it doesn't mean you will feel, even if some sort of stability by the army, but that doesn't